May the Lord give you his peace. Father David Mary here. We're back in our next class as we continue to reflect upon the life of Francis. We're at the general chapter of 1217. And some say this was the most crucial chapter during the life of the saint, that it somehow marks the parting of ways in the development of the order. It led to a loosening of the close intimacy between the brethren and Francis himself, and it weakened the sense of dependence on him. In one sense, the order needed to begin to separate from him as being this charismatic leader and get a life of its own. At the same time, it's sad because he has a break with it in the sense that he needed to begin to separate himself, not from the order itself, but from the governance and so forth. It needed to get on its own feet without him. The chapter assembled at Porziuncula on May 14th. All the friars attended, novices and professed. From all over Italy, they assembled and built small huts of sticks and branches, hundreds of them. They all behaved as true friars minor, they say. No distracting noises, no loud voices, no detraction, no gossip, no idle chatter. Truly were men of good holiness. At the chapter, some ex-intelligents, in other words, people who used to be pretty uppity-buppity in the society, they complained about the simplicity of the fraternity. So you have some bickering going on here. Although we just heard that there was no distracting noises, loud voices, detraction, or gossip, we have some of these things going on. So it's kind of funny how the authors play around with that, isn't it? So all the friars are behaving so well, but yet there are some, those ex-intelligents, those guys who teach at university, those former lawyers who are now in the order, causing problems and complaining about the simplicity of the fraternity. Now, there were other discussions about the sending of friars beyond the Italian peninsula, and provincials were appointed. There was an election of the ministers, and Francis himself chose to go to France. Now, Cardinal Ugolino was there. Let's talk about Cardinal Ugolino. Cardinal Ugolino was a cardinal of the church. He was the prefect of the Congregation of Religious. And Francis met Ugolino in Florence. And Ugolino persuaded Francis not to go to France. Ugolino told Francis there was opposition growing in the community within the hierarchy. And so Brother Pacifico was sent instead. Now, Ugolino himself, Francis asked him to be the cardinal protector of the order because Francis was realizing that the order was getting too big. He couldn't take care of it the way he wanted to. He had this dream of this hen trying to gather the little chicks under his wings, and she couldn't. And so when he woke up from that dream, he realized he could no longer gather all the friars under his wings. He needed help. And that's when he asked the Holy Father. And Cardinal Ugolino, the Cardinal of Ostia, was given as the cardinal protector of the order. Okay? Now the friars were sent out. They were sent from that chapter, sent out, and they went beyond the Alps. Now certain areas received them, but wouldn't let them build houses there. Other provinces expelled them because they thought they might be infidels, thought they might be heretics. Innocent III never confirmed the rule by letter. He only confirmed the rule by word of mouth. And Francis was sending the friars out without any letters. So when they're getting to different countries, like, who are you people? Who are you guys in brown robes, barefoot, patched habits, straggly beards? Who are you people? They tried to make a case for themselves, but didn't always work. They were made to flee from some areas. In France, they were taken for heretics. When they were asked if they were Albigensians, they didn't know what it meant, so they didn't respond. In Portugal, they wandered until the Queen Eurac of Alphonsus II took them under her protection. In Germany, they didn't know the language, and only the word "ja" got them food. So if they were asked, "You want food?" "Ja," they got food. When they were asked if they were heretics, they said "ja," and they got beaten. They were driven out. They had a similar experience in Hungary. Spain was welcoming, and Bernard of Quintavalli led that mission to Spain. And so it didn't go so well. For these reasons, and the response they got, it was considered a failure. Many of the friars lost trust in Francis because he sent them out, and they didn't get well received where they went within the world. The friars had an inability to speak the language. There was a lack of knowledge of the conditions pervading outside of Italy. They carried no authorization documents from the Pope or bishops. There was a time when poverty was a profession mostly of heretics, as I mentioned earlier, the Waldensians. And so the faith of the friars was bruised. Their faith in Francis was bruised. And there was a latent disaffection with Francis's simplicity, and some of the friars, they were starting to express it now. There was a sense of failure. And it's saddened the loyalty of many of the friars. Friars began to look toward Ugolino to place some prudence on St. Francis' decisions. That's how serious it got. We think of St. Francis, everybody just trusted him, he was a wonderful saint. Nah, he had a big goof up there in 1217, at least humanly speaking. And it caused a lot of the friars to begin to distrust him. And we'll start hearing grumblings among the superiors because of this imprudence on Francis's part. Francis never claimed to be a great leader. He just followed the Spirit of the Lord. And so it did cause some terrible effects. So despite all, during the 3 years between 1216 and 1219, the orders continued to experience tremendous, tremendous growth. So now, 1219 to 1220, the chapter of Mass, May 26, 1219. This is a new era for the fraternity. The friars were no longer regarded as a free company by the Holy See. They were acting under papal authority, but not recognized as its regular army, kind of the special forces of the church. About 5,000 friars are assembled. Cardinal Ugolino saw the reform movement, saw the reform of the church depended upon the friars minor and the friars preachers. Again, he's the prefect for the Congregation for Religious, and he sees these two orders, a great preaching order of the Dominicans, and the incredible, fast, rapid growth of these friars who live in the gospel, on fire for the faith, preaching it well, living the gospel. And he's like, man, that's where the reform of the church lies. And so Ugolino began to turn to the friars as the foundation from which the order will grow. He wanted friars to be raised to the episcopate and be teachers in universities. Francis refused. He would not allow that to happen. He wanted the friars to be poor and humble. He felt if they were raised to be bishops and if they're raised to be preachers, they were going to lose their charism, they were going to lose their minority, and then they were going to fall off to be like everybody else. If the church really wanted them to be effective in the church, they needed to remain friars minor, remain poor, remain prayerful, and remain the lowest of the low, to keep that minority. So discontent with Francis' idealism continued to grow and among the friars, and mostly because of the temperament of some of the friars, the educated friars, the practicality over ideals, that Francis' ideals seemed impractical. They were unconscious that in rebelling, they would divert the way of Franciscan living. They weren't thinking about how they were going to wear away at the very life of the charism. They were just trying to be prudent men, but they were doing it in a very human way. They argued that they should at least accept the world's prudence as far as other religious men accepted it, be more like the monks and so forth. Francis would have none of it. Francis, completing a preaching tour, arrived at the Pozzuola while preparations for the chapter were well advanced. And he saw them building this big building put up for the friars by the city. Francis saw this building being put up, this tremendous building. He ran, jumped on the scaffolding, climbed the scaffolding, began to throw the tiles off the roof and try to rip it down with his bare hands. And when the friars told him, hey, this doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the city, he said, great, it belongs to the city, then it's the city's. No one's staying there. And no one stayed there. And so when Ugolino arrived, he said high mass, and Francis preached his most impressive sermon to the friars. So what was his most impressive sermon? It's something we repeat, the friars, after we renew our vows every week. And so it goes like this, the opening of Francis's most impressive sermon. He says, great things we have promised, but greater things are promised to us. What we have promised, let us fulfill. To what we are promised, let us look forward. A brief delight and punishment forever, a little suffering and glory infinite. This beautiful, beautiful sermon that Francis gives about remaining faithful to what we promised. If we remain faithful to what we promised, we shall have peace. And if we keep hopeful about what God promised to us, we'll have joy. And so he calls the friars to live faithfully the charism he gave them, to live faithfully that poverty, faithfully life of prayer, faithfully life of penance, not to swerve from it one bit, not one iota, to stay faithful to the charism. The great things we've promised, but they're nothing in comparison to the rewards that God promised to us. And so Francis always reminds us of that. We should never stray from penance, never stray from minority, never stray from the life that has been granted to us by our Seraphic Father. So Francis did not allow the friars to be concerned about how or what they were to eat, but to be busy about prayer. This is at that chapel with so many thousands gathered. And it caused many to feel right about Francis's impracticability. Like, how are we going to eat? He's not letting us make provisions. Well, God provided. All the townspeople came out and fed the friars, as the good people always take care of the friars. Now, some friars continue to demand for a more organized and practical rule, and so they appealed to Ugolino. Francis wanted none of it. None of it. He didn't want to hear anything about the rule of Benedict, anything the rule about Augustine. He says in his testament, no one man told me what I should do. God himself showed me what I was to do. So this silenced the dissident friars, but it didn't convince them. And there were still those dissident friars who wanted more practicalities to the life and could not accept the simplicity of the gospel and the gospel life as Francis had given it. This becomes a plague for the friars for many centuries to come, which is why we have so many reform movements. There are so many of us who just will not accept the life that Francis bestowed upon us, and we look for mitigations, we look to make it easier, to do this better, we get that, we get this, trying to always mitigate the life and water it down. Now there were some chapter decisions. There was establishment of provinces. Some provinces were confirmed, some were instituted. France was divided into 3 provinces. There were so many friars in France. Brother Giles and others went to Tunis. Brother Vitali and the company was sent to Morocco. And St. Francis decided he was going to Egypt. On July 11th, 1219, the Holy See gave the friars commandatory letters to carry to the missions. And Francis opposed it to no ideal. He said, I don't want them carrying letters to the missions. I want them going with the letters of God himself, with the workings of the Holy Spirit, the witness of their life. Didn't help any, didn't work. In May of 1220, Honorius III sent a stronger letter to the bishops of France, telling them that they better be good to the friars. And Cardinal Ugolino felt they needed the protection and sanction of the church. And so Francis just wanted the friars to go out there and take whatever comes. They accept you, they accept you. They don't accept you, they don't accept you. But Honorius III, the Pope, was like, nah, you better accept them. And Cardinal Ugolino was like, yeah, let's make sure they get protected while they go out there. Francis is like, just let them go, it's okay. And they're like, nah. So Francis lost that battle with the church. Okay. So June 24th, 1219, Francis heads for the east. The 2 vicar generals that were appointed by Ugolino to govern the order during Francis's absence. The first was named Brother Matthew of Narni, and he was a man of noted sanctity, and he was to reside at the Portiuncula and receive novices, so he was commissioned to be the temporary acting minister general. Then there was Brother Gregory of Naples, and he was to travel and visit the provinces. In later years, he acquired an unevenable reputation. He was imprisoned in 1240 due to cruelty towards other friars, so Gregory had a few issues. On June 24th, Francis set out for Ancona with Brother Peter Catani, Brother Illuminato, Brother Leonard, and Brother Barbaro, and some others. According to Bartholomew of Pisa, St. Francis did not want to show favoritism upon whom he chose to go with him to the east, so he had a little child choose for him who was going to go with him. He arrived in Cyprus, and that's where in Cyprus Brother Barbaro lost his temper with one of the other friars and humbly apologized by putting dung in his mouth for having said what he said to him. In his own mouth, by the way. About the middle of July, they reached Acre, the stronghold of the Crusades on the Syrian coast. From there, he sailed on to Damietta in Egypt, where the Christian army was in the middle of a siege. Francis witnessed the decadence of the Crusaders. And by the end of August, the Crusades planned a great assault. Francis knew it was doomed to failure. He warned them, but they did not listen, and the Crusaders lost 6,000 men that day. Francis requested the papal legate to cross over to preach to the Sultan. The Sultan offered a golden ducat to anyone who brought him a Christian head. The Sultan of that day and age, Malik al-Kamil, was the Osama bin Laden of his day. Okay? So Francis took Brother Illuminato with him, and they went to see the Sultan. They were captured and brought to the Sultan's camp. Again, his name, Malek el-Kamil. It seems that St. Francis had several audiences with the Sultan, but he did not convert him. But Francis got free passage anywhere in the Holy Land. So Francis did not convert the Sultan. He worked out a deal where we would have free access to the Holy Land, be given the Holy Land and so forth, but that was rejected by the Christians when Francis returned to the camp. He formed a very good friendship with Malek al-Kamil, although he didn't convert him. And Malek al-Kamil gave him a beautiful horn that is still preserved in Assisi to this day in the reliquary. You can see it, and that horn gave Francis free passage anywhere in a Muslim world. So Francis couldn't get martyred if he wanted to because he was a friend of the Sultan. Now, one story does say that when Malek al-Kamil was dying, he sent for friars who baptized him on his deathbed. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. We pray it is true, but we're not sure. However, St. Francis was able to go to Jerusalem. He was able to go to Bethlehem. And it was in Jerusalem is where he saw the Stations of the Cross and so forth, and was able to introduce that to the life of the friars. It's where he saw Bethlehem, and we know what happens in Greccio not long after this. Okay? So, Damietta was taken by the Christians in 1220 on the Feast of the Purification. Crusaders lost all decadence once they entered Egypt. Francis stayed with them until the city was taken. In the spring of 1220, Francis returned to Acre. He took with him many clerics who were among the Crusaders and then became Friars Minor. In Acre, in Syria, Francis met with Brother Elias, the provincial of Syria, and a novice, Caesar of Speyer, who will become very important in Franciscan history. Caesar fled Germany, where he preached the crusade, and he was an incredible theologian who died a martyr's death. Now, I think we have, we know we don't have enough time. Oh yeah, we can do some stuff here. Let's talk about the first Franciscan martyrs. They were martyred on January 16th, 1220, and they were canonized in 1481 by Pope Sixtus IV. 5 friars were put to death in Morocco. Brother Berardo, Brother Otho, Brother Pietro, Brother Accurso, and a Brother Ajuto. These 5 friars gave their lives and were the first friars to die a martyr's death. They arrived in Seville, Spain under Muslim rule. They were imprisoned and scourged for the faith, and finally they were expelled. The 5 continued on to Morocco. They not only preached in the streets, but they also entered the mosques and denounced Muhammad there. They were imprisoned and then tried to convert their jailers. The Infante, Pedro of Portugal, a resident in the Sultan's court, requested they be sent away instead of killed. At first opportunity, the 5 friars returned to the city streets, denouncing Muhammad once again. They were captured, tortured, put on the rack, offered life and gifts to deny Christ. Finally, the 5 were beheaded, and their bodies were cast out of the city walls as food for dogs. Pedro of Portugal witnessed their martyrdom and had their bodies taken to Portugal, where they were placed in the Church of the Canons Regular in Coimbra. And in Coimbra was a young friar by the name of Ferdinand, who saw their martyrdom, and he decided as a result of their martyrdom, this young priest, this Augustinian priest, was going to abandon his life as an Augustinian, become a friar minor, and he took the name Anthony after St. Anthony of the Desert, and from now on that friar is known as St. Anthony of Padua. So a former Augustinian priest who joins the Order of Friars Minor as a result of the martyrdom of the first Franciscan martyrs, Anthony of Padua, a great preacher, our first Franciscan theologian. When Francis heard about the news of their martyrdom, he exclaimed, "Now I can truly say I have 5 lesser brothers, 5 friar minors." These 5 men who gave up their life for Christ in holy martyrdom. We'll pick up here in our next segment. May God bless you and Mary keep you.